Check, check. Good morning, everyone. Welcome. Can you hear me okay? Can we get a little more volume? Thank you. Welcome. My name is Christine Kane. I am an author and podcaster. I used to be a musician. Some of you have come up and told me that and reminded me of that. And I also am an entrepreneur and business coach. And this is my second time hosting this. And as with anything that's going on right now, there's always a little bit of weirdness. There's always a little bit of tension when we come into a room like this to do something very important. And so even though this is not my event, I think it's really important that we anchor to why we're here. Those of you who have been to this before know that it's been much bigger, and we know we're in a post-COVID world. But still, when you walk into a room like this, the intention is powerful. And also, each one of us brings into the room all kinds of little voices and sensitivities. And for some of us, it's the first time we've put on clothing since COVID started. Someone said it was the first time she put on a bra since COVID started. And some of us are introverts, some of us are in recovery, some of us are recovered, some of us are still suffering. And so as we begin, I want to remind you that CRC, one of the biggest things they do is they create sacred space. And so it only seems appropriate for us to start by just taking a moment to get grounded and centered and just invite any of the stresses, any of the self-judgments, anything that might have trailed in with you today, this morning, to just fall away and remember why we're here. I'll start with why I'm here. And that is that for 10 years I struggled with an eating disorder and then went into recovery upon moving to Asheville. Last year, at the end of 2020, I published my first book. And it's called The Soul-Sourced Entrepreneur. And there is a subtitle to that book, and it says, An Unconventional Success Plan for the Highly Creative, Secretly Sensitive, and Wildly Ambitious. And when I went around New York City with my agent, shopping the book to publishers, one of the key things that we kept hearing from publishers in the business book publishing world was that they wanted to eliminate that line, secretly sensitive. And that's because people are so uneasy with confessing, with admitting that there's anything vulnerable about them. And it's not just in the business world. It's everywhere we go. It's every place we see ourselves. And for some of us, it's in our own families. And so to get us started today, I'm going to read you a tiny little segment of my book where I, like many of the speakers here, I had to really summon the courage to share something very vulnerable about myself. And this section introduces the section about power, because I consider power very differently from many people in the business world. And this is called Power Redefined, and it opens up with a conversation I had in my 20s here in Asheville. Excuse me? They would have to turn the volume up a little bit. Okay. Okay, well, I'm kind of making out with the microphone right now, but okay. Can you hear me all right now? Okay. It's a conversation I had with another person who was in recovery here in Asheville when I was in my 20s. Her. Hold on, you feel sorry for yourself because you're not an alcoholic like me? Me. I'm just saying you're lucky. Your addiction lets you give up the thing you're addicted to. Mine doesn't. Her. I'm lucky? You're saying I'm lucky to be an alcoholic? Me. I'm saying you're lucky because you can avoid the thing that triggers you, and I can't do that. My thing's food. I can't avoid food. Her. So you're jealous of me because I'm an alcoholic? That's what you're saying? Me. Well, when you put it that way, it makes me sound addled. Her. Oh, girl, we're way past addled here. Me. All I'm saying is that when you're getting over bulimia, cold turkey is not an option. I don't get to remove all the food from my apartment. I can't stop hanging out with friends who eat food or stop going to parties where they serve it. There's no detox period. It's harder than other addictions. Her. So I was right. You feel sorry for yourself because you're not an alcoholic. This was an actual conversation that occurred when I was in the beginning stages of healing an addiction that had been relentless and all-consuming for 10 years of my life, bulimia. In my martyred state, I rationalized that other addicts had it easier than me. After all, if you were addicted to cocaine or tequila, you could rid your life of the offending substance. Then you could just show up for your 12-step meetings and deal with the withdrawals, right? Never mind the many holes in my logic, the inability to get rid of food felt like an impossible obstacle to my own recovery. But it turned out to be the exact opposite. This one crushing affliction would become the unlikely access point to my own power. By definition, the process of healing bulimia wouldn't let me play my usual game of sidestepping the thing that caused my problems. I was forced to create an actual relationship with that thing. In this case, food. I didn't like this. I wanted a quick fix so I could be done with my fucked up self. I wanted a magic pill that would make it all go away, or at the very least, a nice, linear, easy-to-follow strategy. But when someone sets an intention, whether in life or business, the manifestation is rarely linear. When I initiated an intention to free myself from the grips of bulimia, no pill appeared, no game plan materialized. Free, I found out, wasn't something that got scribbled on a handy-dandy prescription pad by a jovial physician, nor was it the pot of gold at the end of an easy 5-step formula. Free was something I had to become. This meant I stumbled my way into and out of binges, emotional triggers, colitis, hating exercise, loving exercise, obsessing on exercise, panic attacks, depression, and whatever mystery symptoms appeared on any given day. I flung myself into my bed dozens of times thinking I'm not capable of this, or I'm too sensitive, or this is all too much. Slowly, though, I began to embrace and embody a new level of energy, of power. The power to make choices and to intentionally create a life. As it turns out, I am the common denominator in all the arenas of my world, which means I have to show up, to be present. So I stopped looking for the escape hatch, and I rebuilt a relationship with my food, my body, and my reactions. 3 things I could not, try as I might, get rid of. And this is why, strange as it sounds, bulimia was my first business mentor. It forced me to see in real time that real power and real solutions come from connection and attention, even in the face of extreme discomfort. Bulimia taught me to stop seeking power over, to stop avoiding uncertainty, and to open up and be curious instead. When I was at that point in my life, I did not have anything like CRC to lean in on. When I came to Asheville, it just sort of happened that I stumbled onto finding people who could finally help me, and the reason they could help me was that eating disorders were not a stigma. They were not something that was separate as a psychological component of somebody's studies of all the people I had been working with up to that point. And CRC has grown since 2004 to be that resource center for people like me who feel lost and ashamed. And what you're about to see here today is a very quick, very clear morning of some very courageous people sharing how eating disorders have impacted them. Some are in recovery, some are suffering, some are parents. But I will say the common denominator for each person that's here is the executive director of CRC. Simone Seitz has rounded up people. She has passionately and relentlessly built so much energy, so much compassion, and so much passion in this beautiful entity that is the Carolina Resource Center for Eating Disorders. Please welcome Simone Seitz to the stage.
Nope. Hello? If it's AV, it messes up. That's just my story. Thank you, Christine. Good morning. Sorry about we're all awake now. What I was going to say is it's really great to see faces, like 3D, instead of on a screen, so thank you. I'm going to start here. 9% of North Carolinians will have an eating disorder, and recovery looks different for each of these individuals and their loved ones. Sometimes we lose precious life to eating disorders. Eating disorders have the second highest mortality rate of any mental illness. Sometimes it takes a very long time working through the complexities of this illness, and sometimes there is sustained recovery. So, what does recovery look like? That's what we're talking about today. There isn't one simple answer, but we do know this. It is possible, and awareness and early intervention support it. This is why CRC's outreach and education is so vital. Wherever an individual is on their recovery, we're here to connect however we can through resource and referral and support. Much like everyone in this room, this past year has been very challenging. For our organization, we faced development and capacity challenges. We modified our programming. We adjusted to shifts in provider services and so much more. We also recognized that moving things to a virtual platform allowed us further reach and accessibility, and that we were able to work with even more people by hosting our support groups online, providing our education virtually, and by reallocating where our time was spent so that we could be there for the many who were reaching out to support through our helpline. When comparing the metrics from March 2019 to 2020 and March 2020 to 2021, there was a 69% increase in our helpline calls. with added challenges due to severity and placement issues. We're still here doing what we do. It just looks different, and that's okay. We don't stop, we adapt, because mental health support is just too important. When I'm talking with someone through our helpline, community engagement, or living my life, I recognize the threads of disordered eating and eating disorders in so many, and the importance of talking about it. Just talking about it. In today's program, I hope you're feeling inspired when you leave here to talk about it. There's a lot of shame. There's a lot of isolation. There's so much darkness around eating disorders that we just have to start talking. Today, we have the gift of, as Christine said, courageous people willing to be vulnerable and share their perspective with you. And this is important because their truth, their stories have to be heard. Thank you to Jody, Kate, Louisa, Kimberly, Vance, Bruce, and Joe for talking about what recovery looks like to you, COVID's impact, and CRC for ED. Thank you to Christine for being our MC again today and for gifting us with your voice and guiding us through our program. And thank you all for spending your time with us. The board of directors and I are grateful for our longtime supporters and the many new hearts that are going to be here with us today. Thank you.
So we all met here yesterday and talked about this and walked through the speakers, and we got to know each other. And one of the things that really struck me is how people have found their way to Carolina Resource Center. And Jody Montree is one such person. She is a school counselor and described how the more she was in the school system here in Buncombe County, the more she realized there is such an enormous need for the resources and the support that CRC provides. And what really blew me away was how much of her own personal energy and her own personal time and her own personal passion that she brought to her quest to heal and help recovering people and sick people who are really, really struggling with this affliction. So please welcome Jody Montree.
Good morning. Is that working? All right. Thanks again for joining us. I'm really pleased to, like Simone said, see faces and real bodies. When I first started working in schools about 20 years ago, more than 20 years ago, I didn't have any training in eating disorders. Hadn't really ever talked about it or thought about it, but and I quickly became aware, as you might remember from your own childhood or raising your own kids, how constantly challenged and fragile self-esteem can be. I often hear, I'm too tall, I'm not tall enough, I'm too thin, I'm not thin enough, I'm too light, I'm too dark, I'm not fast enough, I'm not smart enough, I'm just not enough. And in my daily meetings with kids, that's a constant sharing that they give me. We humans constantly compare ourselves to each other, and our children hear that voice and they model that, or they copy that rather with their peers. I had a set of identical fourth grade twins, boys, that I was working with one year, and one of them came to me frustrated and upset. He was slightly larger than his identical twin in body, and his peers were constantly pointing it out to him, teasing him, making fun of him, joking with him. Whether or not it was intended to be mean, it was incredibly hurtful, and it was impacting the way he thought about himself. And I have a million more stories like that to share, but that one really stuck with me about, I didn't really see any difference. When I had a hard time telling the twins apart. one of them had a small birthmark, and that's my marker that I used to know which one I was talking about. But when he said it to me, when he talked about that moment, it really kind of sunk in how critical children are, how critical we are when we're comparing ourselves to others, and how body is one of the things that we point out or we notice the most. Over the years of my work, I've discovered body image concerns, diet culture mentality, early disordered eating thoughts and behaviors in children as young as 4. And I quickly realized that I wanted more awareness, I wanted more resources to give to parents. I wanted to know more so that I wasn't deepening shame and isolation in my kids, inadvertently, spouting the same diet culture or the same exercise or health that I thought was correct that I learned when I was growing up, which now I've since realized wasn't really great for me either growing up, if that makes sense. And so that led me to CRC for ED. And I'm eternally grateful that this resource is there, that when I call parents, which I frequently do, I currently work with pre-adolescents, preteens and teens, and to be able to call a parent and give them CRC for ED's number, the call line that Simone was talking about, I feel better giving them that resource. They desperately want somebody on the other end to steer them in the right direction. When I talk with kids, I hear what they say through a different lens. I hear what I say through a different lens. I work with my teachers differently. I work with my community differently. And that's all due to what CRC for ED has taught me, has given me. As a board member, I've been able to go deeper in understanding how this work and getting the message out is eternally important. I've also had the privilege of facilitating the adult support group over the years, both when we were in person and then more recently over the last year as we've moved to virtual. And you'll frequently hear how isolating and how secretive eating disorders are, and the adult support group gives them a safe place to talk with others about shared experience, about lived experience. It's an inclusive group, and it's powerful to hear them share their experiences, talk about their pain, but also give the gift of hope to each other. Over the last year and during the pandemic, as we've met virtually, the numbers of our adult support group have more than tripled. And we've got people coming from Maryland, from Maine, from Ohio, from Michigan, across North Carolina, and definitely in our own Western North Carolina. And it's so cool I'm eternally humbled when I go. Every time I'm humbled to sit in that room and hear their wisdom. And it is an extremely vital part of what Carolina Resource Center for Eating Disorders provides. In addition to that, the outreach education program that is growing, and I'm so happy it's growing, is making headway and making change in our medical communities, in our schools, and in our community at large. I had a 5th grade boy that I was working with several years ago, more than several years ago at this point, and he bravely told me that he had just had his physical before going to middle school, and that the doctor had told him that he was obese. And how devastated he was hearing that information, how shamed he was thinking about his body being unhealthy or gross or whatever that word conveys. And again, this is a child who was on the cusp of growing taller, of growing stronger, and this is the message he was given as a 10-year-old boy. And so my work with these kids as they grow into their bodies, as they learn from each other, as they become sensitive and their self-esteem is, again, constantly challenged, it's important what the educational outreach program does, working with the medical community, so they can understand the impact that words like that are just so callously shared have on our youth. So I am grateful that you're here, and I encourage you to stay involved, to to think about our culture that we live in, the media that's out there, and what it does, the message it conveys to our children, the message it conveys to all of us, and how we spin that in our general conversations to each other, how we support each other, what we compare, how we point it out, and keep learning, keep growing. I'm very excited and proud to be part of Carolina Resource Center and see where we grow next. It's a really cool organization. I'm very proud of Simone Seitz. Thank you all for being here.
I'm told my microphone is not working very well, so I'm just going to use this one. As you're obviously aware of, eating disorders affect all of us in some ways. Everybody knows somebody is the theme of these breakfasts, and I think no one feels more devastated and helpless from an eating disorder than the parent of the child who is struggling with that eating disorder. And we have several parents who are here to speak today, and the first is Kate DeVix, and I think her story and her vulnerability will truly show you the need for CRC, because in a time during this COVID where we are all so isolated, she had somewhere to land and someone to speak to. Please welcome Kate DeVix to the stage.
Do we have pictures? Can you hear me? Good. Thank you. You do. You do have pictures. These photos are pictures of Maureen Feldbaum. You can see her from earlier in life and more recently. It's going to be hard for me not to cry, and you'll understand why. And I am amazed that I'm here, and I am here because Simone asked me. But I've realized in preparing for today that this forced me to go through a process and gave me a chance to talk about my daughter in a way that I need to. Maureen was born in 1980. When she was diagnosed with anorexia, it was 1994. In fact, she had just turned 14, and she was about to enter 9th grade. She had had a very sudden, very rapid weight loss starting when she was at camp and when she came home. Fortunately, there was a hospital in a nearby city a little over an hour away, and we were able to pay for 3 months of hospitalization. I say able to because her father had pre-existing conditions. We had not changed our health insurance in many, many years, and we did not have mental health coverage. Also, 2 days after Maureen entered the hospital, he was in a single car accident where a tree came through the engine of a Lincoln Town car, and he was unable to work at all for about 6 months and would never fully return to work, and by the age of 40 was considered disabled. But Maureen did well. She got back to school. She started running track, so she had a new outlet for everything, but she maintained her weight. She graduated second in her class. That was good. She went to college up in the Northeast at William & Mary. She continued in track. She stopped halfway through the second year and wanted to do a Knowles Outdoor Leadership Program. She didn't seem quite as happy, but she did the program, and then summer school, and then back to school, and then she was in her 4th year, and she called home frequently, but was mostly coming home just during the holidays because she was doing things at school during the summer. And she called and she told me she was getting some counseling at the Student Health Services, but she didn't really talk about why. She just wanted me to know that she had taken that action. And it was after the Thanksgiving holidays when we got the call. Maureen had, unbeknownst to us when we saw her, we didn't see the signs, but she had become bulimic, and she had started cutting herself. And she had made a particularly deep cut that wasn't healing, told her counselor, and the school took action and immediately sent her to the general psych ward of a large hospital in a nearby city. With my husband's disability, I was the one to go. It was a scramble to put together, she was released to my care. It was a scramble to put together a treatment team. I pleaded and pleaded with the top psychiatrist in Richmond, who said his caseload was already full. And he said later, if you had not persisted like that, you know, I would not have done it. But we got a team put in place, and it was decided Maureen was well enough to go back to school. She only needed 2 classes to graduate, and she graduated magna cum laude. And she looked good. She seemed happier. She lined up a house-sitting job and another job in Williamsburg so she could stay there for the summer, and she had a really nice job lined up for the fall in DC, where she had relatives living. They helped her find a psychologist there who she could work with. But within 8 months of being in that job, the psychologist alerted the family to the fact that Maureen had not been taking her antidepressant. She was clinically depressed. She was very bulimic, and she was suicidal. And what happened was, actually, the next 6 years, starting with the hospitalization she received then, over the next 6 years, she would be hospitalized 6 times in 6 different states. And I do want to emphasize that she chose to go to the hospital all those times. She knew she needed help. There was no CRC. We had no one to help. I'm an avid researcher. She was an avid researcher. And I will say about that scramble in college to find help, I was an attorney working with a nonprofit providing free legal services for the disabled. I knew how to advocate. I couldn't believe how hard that scramble was, how alone my daughter felt and I felt in that journey. So in those 6 years, Maureen really wanted to be a successful, independent adult. Our moderator, what you said, the things in your book, I heard my daughter's voice. And she looked at nursing, and the family's thinking, how is she going to do nursing? Finally, after the 6th hospitalization, which I will say was at UNC Chapel Hill, she was better, and she followed it up with an outpatient program, and she stayed in Chapel Hill. And she started working as a CNA for a little autistic girl. She connected with the yoga community and got back to biking and running, which she loved. She loved outdoor adventures, and she loved proving that although she was a petite little 4'11" person, she could do anything anybody else could do. And she wanting to be independent, she decided she was going to get a master's in speech-language pathology. Doing great academically, came to Atlanta where I was working in federal court, and for a month internship at Children's Hospital. My heart was so full of love. I was so excited that I would get to have that time with her. But she wasn't doing well. I could see it. She found her supervisor difficult to work with. I didn't see that much of her. She saw a therapist for a little time, but wouldn't take advantage of the other supports I offered. And I knew she was struggling with her eating. She did make herself go for one walk with me. It was memorable, but it was only one during that month. And when she went back to school, and what happened was this. A fellow student who was aware of Maureen's eating disorder saw Maureen throwing up in the clinical setting. It was not during clinical hours. Maureen said, I was sick, I wasn't purging. But her fellow student reported it to the faculty, it went to the dean of students. Amazingly, they spoke with me. Because when you're a child with a problem like an eating disorder, their privacy is respected, and you know very little. You can find out some in family therapy. Mostly you're reliant on your child's willingness to talk to you, but your child is full of shame. They don't want to be in the place where they are. They want to be where everyone else is, or where they think everyone else is, leading a successful, happy life. So a treatment team was put in place again, the psychiatrist, psychologist, and the nutritionist. She was not allowed to do her clinical hours until she demonstrated and the team felt that it was okay. When she finally was allowed to do her clinical hours, everyone else had graduated, and she didn't get that plum type of clinical working hours that she had wanted. She took the first job she could get. And in that job and the next job, she had what are classic signs of someone with a true disability. Difficulty working in the workplace with your peers, difficulty interacting with your supervisor. She had some of the finest clinical skills that the faculty had ever seen when she was a student, but she was having problems, and she was bulimic. She was bulimic to the point of being anorexic. The diagnosis is anorexia binge purge, which is what I call the worst of both worlds. And then she called. It was November 3, 2017. I had remarried, Thanksgiving 2015, and I had just been widowed 3 months earlier, pancreatic cancer. But in order to marry Michel, I moved to Greenville to be with him because he was French and they had moved there in the 70s and he knew the area. And I was really glad to come back to this part of the country. My family had lived in Spartanburg. So anyway, Maureen called me to tell me that she had tried to take her life the night before and that it hadn't worked and that she was very sorry it hadn't worked. Well, I was free to immediately drive up to be with her. She was actually in between insurance coverage. I said, Maureen, come be with me. You shouldn't stay alone any longer. So she did. For 4 months, 5 months, maybe 6 months, all she did was rest and recuperate. We had a medical doctor. She saw a psychologist, then a nutritionist, was contacting a psychiatrist. The best thing she found, faces and voices of recovery. Now, I didn't know about CRC. I was looking at what was going on and available in South Carolina. And I was very sad to see that it wasn't much more than when I had lived in South Carolina. The only thing, people are active in Charleston, and then there was the South Carolina Eating Disorder Association group in Columbia. Wonderful, wonderful people. Margaret Yakel and Karen McMullen and some of the professionals in that program. But I was over in, Greenville, and unaware of CRC until later. So, and Maureen seemed better. For a few months in the summer, plummeted right again. I didn't know exactly why. There was a conflict she felt. She perceived one over something, not with me, but between her nutritionist and the provider. And it was really a mentor. And it was really the mentor that was causing the problem. She wanted to give nutritional advice too. At any rate, by the fall of 2018, the psychiatrist told Maureen that she needed to be immediately medically hospitalized or she would die. When Maureen worked with her Medicare disability coverage, they could not find a single hospital in the entire state that said it was equipped and willing to take Maureen as a patient because of her eating disorder. And her insurance would not cover a medical hospitalization out of state. Maureen did her research. There are very, very few Medicare hospitals, Medicare programs in a hospital that have an eating disorder program, and there's only a handful that, if it's a handful, that accept adults. Maureen went, and she went voluntarily. At that point, she was 38 years old. She weighed in at 57 pounds. And they asked her if she had a gun, if she owned one, and she said yes, but that she was not suicidal at that time. The only way we knew this is because she asked her younger brother to go with her when she was admitted, which I was so happy about because I thought they'll have a close relationship. He's a wonderful, big-hearted person and a nurse, and I won't always be here. Maureen stayed almost 2 months. But after about 5 weeks, or more than 5 weeks, when I went to visit her the second time, she had not yet been given a pass. She had been confined on the unit. And the reason she had not been given a pass to go out for a few moments of fresh air or to go to the cafeteria in the hospital with a group was for things like this. She didn't use the second packet of salad dressing on her salad. She pocketed a salad dressing. She pocketed a packet of salad, of salt once. And she would take the crust off her sandwich and put it in her salad. Her psychiatrist had a zero tolerance policy. To him, these things were eating disordered behaviors, and she could not have a pass. As I was driving up to see her, she gave her notice, 48 hours, whatever it was, she was going to leave. Now staff had told me, was participating fully in all of the therapy, would ask for extra help. But she gave notice because of her psychiatrist position. It just drove her up the wall. And I told her, I said, Maureen, I'm sorry, but I'm here to visit you, but not to take you home. But a week and a half later, she gave notice a second time, and her psychiatrist said, you don't have to wait. You can go right now. And she did, and she came home. She came home determined to be an independent adult. She decided that she would apply to an ultrasound program. And what a difficult program. I would say, why? I can't believe you're doing this. I couldn't do this. The thing is, this program is the first picture she allowed me to take of her in 15 years. And you can tell, you can see she's pretty thin and everything. She sure doesn't look like she did earlier. But by the holiday, she was so stressed out, and she was doubting whether she could do the program. And I looked at her, and all I could see was the bones under the skin in her face. And I didn't leave the home during the holidays. For one, it was COVID, and I had no place to go, but I wanted to be there any second she was there. 6 weeks into the spring semester, she died at the age of 40. What I didn't know was that 2 weeks after she had gotten back from Princeton, she bought another gun from the same store. Now, bless her heart, Simone, she called to check on me to see how I was doing. Maureen had been dead 3 weeks. And at the end of the hour and a half of listening to me, she asked me if I would do this. And I was really tired, and I said, sure. And 3 or 4 weeks later, I said to her, I think it's too early. I mean, too soon to prepare. And then about a month after that, I said, well, what's your theme anyway? And when she said, it's stages of recovery, which I see runs from death to full recovery, she got me. Because you see, look at Maureen's life. She had stages of recovery of a certain type. I was talking to her mother a little bit earlier, and my daughter tried to focus on being an adult because she felt so much shame and guilt. She hated that she was on Social Security disability insurance, which came during that 6 hospitalizations in 6 years, because as a family, we couldn't afford to pay for her care. And she was unable to hold down a job, and that persisted over time. And the real focus needs to be not on trying to look good in the world's eyes and what you think you're supposed to do and what you see everybody else is doing, but to realize that these bodies that we live in are like the most exquisite vehicle that we will ever drive. No car is as intricate as these bodies. And we need to, each one is different, and how we maintain them is different, but understanding that is core to understanding how to survive, and how to survive an eating disorder. I have been blown away as I look back at my daughter's life. I'm blown away as I see more clearly the strength, the effort, and the tenacity that it took for her to hold on to life as long as she did. And she told me that for her, because she didn't get like CRC help earlier, and I was giving her all the love I could, and her family did too, but I was the main factor in her life, and all that love and all the willpower she could muster, which she really tried to muster, was not enough to save her. And I asked myself why, and this is my conclusion at the end of these weeks of preparing to come here. I think it's because she was brain starved. We know that anorexia changes the brain. Her periods of starvation were much longer than the treatment recovery she received. And then there was always that insurance pressure to get out. And her brain simply couldn't do it. And the whole biochemistry, the whole physiology, the whole neurology of her body was changed by her anorexia binge purge that she suffered with. When she tried to take her life in 2017, she was purging 20 times a day. All that muscle memory of purging that she couldn't break through. And so this has been a very difficult process for me to be here, but you heard the statistics about the death rate, exceeded only by the death rate due to the opioid crisis. And Maureen's story makes it very real. But fortunately, and you will hear stories of people who have benefited from CRC, people are recovering. So let me remind myself what I wanted to tell you. Wrap up, yes, but, thank you, and I'm sorry. Thank you for being here today. I leave you with a blessing buried in the swirls of paint of a painting I have. It says this life moves very fast, and the most important thing is the people who make this journey with us. So let us make haste to love and do kindness. That's what CRC is doing. And through its acts of kindness and all its endeavors, it is helping people find a path of recovery for themselves or for their loved one. So thank you.
One of the things that COVID has really shown us is how much uncertainty there is and how much confusion there is. And a lot, what Simone has talked about is that they have seen their numbers skyrocket in terms of need, in terms of parents reaching out, and in terms of people dealing with this because of all the added stress. And our next speaker, Louisa Davis, is one of those parents who is dealing with a child with an eating disorder that has escalated because of the stress that we're all dealing with right now. So please welcome Louisa to the stage.
I've got my notes here. Hello, can you hear me? Let's see. Okay. I think my daughter has an eating disorder. That was my first call to Carolina Resource Center. It was a Monday, July 27th to be exact. I know this because the first piece of helpful advice was to get a notebook and to start taking notes and keeping track of my research. Thank you for that, Simone. Little did I know it would be another 25 turbulent days before dropping our daughter off for residential treatment with the official diagnosis of anorexia nervosa. You see, the plan was to start her freshman year of college. We can probably all agree that eating disorders don't give a damn about future plans, and college is certainly no exception. In the beginning days of COVID quarantine, amidst cancellation after cancellation of long-awaited high school senior milestones, we were able to find silver linings. Slowing down and staying home offered newfound quality time for our family. Our daughter began cooking healthy meals for our family, and she was baking too. We began enjoying walks together and virtual dance fitness classes. In the beginning of COVID pandemic, her father and I both thought she was so happy and finding new interests that she really enjoyed. This time last year, we were celebrating her high school graduation. In my mom gut, I knew something was wrong. Her dad, not so much at this point. Although she still made delicious meals, her portions became smaller and so lean, it seemed to take a long time to complete her meals. No cheese, no bread. All of a sudden, she was a vegetarian and no longer enjoying her homemade treats. What was happening right before our eyes was a rigid set of personal rules wrapped around food, weight, and size. I was starting to notice some sort of comparison spiral. I blamed COVID, the increased downtime, scroll of social media, and the constant barrage of airbrushed and edited pictures on Instagram and TikTok. At this point, I didn't even realize the copious amounts of diet culture posts that were showing up in all of her social feeds. That was May. Fast forward to June. Our daughter had a physical with her pediatrician. She would be attending the Summer Advantage program at her future college during the month of July. Although she had lost over 20 pounds since January, her doctor wasn't concerned. I was there in the room. She asked questions about calorie consumption. They discussed missed periods. There were so many red flags. As I tell you this today, I'm wondering, what in the world was I thinking? How did I not know? And how did her physician not know? Why did he not pick up on this? Soon after this appointment, our daughter left for the Summer Advantage program. I remember thinking this will be so good for her, normal social interactions, and the daily structure that school can bring will get her over this new healthy obsession. With all the COVID restrictions in place, there was nothing normal about this pre-college experience. Face masks all the time, social distancing, isolated meals, single dorms. I sensed her behaviors were getting worse. I drove up for a visit before leaving, and I picked up sushi for dinner. I dropped it up to leave with her. I'll never forget the look on my daughter's face. She said, "I can't eat this. It's too much rice on a sushi roll." At this point, I knew I had to act. We needed professional help. But who and where do I even begin? My husband and I did what you do when you're looking for information. We turned to Google. We found a local nutritionist who can see our daughter virtually, of course, because it's COVID. Because we didn't know any better, we chose a nutritionist who helps normalize one's relationship with food, not one who specializes in eating disorders. I will come to learn there's a big difference. After 4 agonizing weeks, our daughter was home from Summer Advantage. We have 3 weeks to get this under control before she starts her freshman year. My God, my naivety runs deep. Something I say often in my business world is I can't acknowledge what I don't know. And remember that date, July 27th. It was my first communication with Carolina Resource Center. My eyes were opened wide, and what would follow is a chain of events leading us to acceptance of what we were facing and paths to recovery. My first call with Simone was full of supportive and empowering information. We created a care plan to help us make informed decisions, names and numbers, credible resources to start my research, an assessment appointment by a qualified eating disorder professional, and a conversation about treatment options. My God, I had never even heard the acronyms PHP and IOP. My head was spinning, and I remember Simone saying to me when we hung up after that first call, "Here is a number for a nutritionist specialist that specializes in eating disorders. Call her today. Do this now, don't wait." I believe this was my first introduction to a critical support skill, do the next right thing, which has become a mantra of sorts for my daughter and I. It strengthens us in time of need. Having informed direction is a lifeline. It was the new nutritionist, Katie, that helped us to understand the eating disorder voice that is dominating our lives and our daughter's physical health. I don't know exactly what Katie said that 17th day of August, but when we walked out, my daughter looked at me and said, "I have to go away for treatment." And in her own words, explained she didn't want to give more of her life away to an eating disorder. That next day, August 18th, we had an appointment with an exceptional adolescent medicine doctor in Greenville, South Carolina, another referral through CRC. The doctor confirmed the anorexia diagnosis. He also told us she was to drink 3 large bottles of Gatorade the next 2 days and come back for vitals. She would be hospitalized for fluids if there was not improvement. That same afternoon, we received the call that she had been cleared for admission to a residential treatment home in North Carolina. 2 days later, August 20th, we dropped our daughter off in Durham, North Carolina, not High Point University for her freshman year like we had hoped and planned. Because of COVID, we could not even go inside to tour this facility. I couldn't meet a single person on her care team that was going to be helping our daughter through this crisis. This was a tremendous leap of faith, and it was all possible because of the trust I had built in CRC. Simone called me that day on our way home from dropping our daughter off. She gently educated me on how difficult treatment will be, both physically and mentally. She'll most likely call you, she'll be angry, and she's gonna wanna come home. Trust the process, stay the course. You've got this, Mom. And just like that, the call came, just like I was told it would, and thanks to the support and the information, the knowledge I received from CRC, I was prepared, and we stayed the course. After her time in residential treatment, a long haul in PHP through the holidays, a short stint in IOP, our daughter is home and she's doing well. As a matter of fact, I asked her this morning before I came in, is there anything you would like me to say? And she said, Mom, you can tell them I'm happy. She also participates in the virtual support group sponsored by CRC. Sometimes she doesn't want to do it. It's a Wednesday night support group. And we'll talk through goals like starting college in the fall. She pushes through, she does the next right thing and shows up. And I get to witness her renewed strength and resolve every time she does. Thank you for providing this service. Hope is a powerful tool, and hope without action will never be enough to pull us out of the darkness. When we give light, people can find the way. Carolina Resource Center was the light when we were in the death grip of an eating disorder. It was through the support, encouragement, referrals, resources provided by CRC that enabled us to build pathways to recovery. Our daughter is on track to start her freshman year this fall, August 22nd, almost 1 year to the date that our recovery journey began. Now I know for sure nothing is set in stone. And whatever ED throws us, we are equipped to strive at least for that next right step.
My name is Simone Seitz. I'm the Executive Director of Carolina Resource Center for Eating Disorders. I think it's important for people to understand that recovery doesn't look the same for everyone. It's not a one-size-fits-all. Sometimes it's a super long journey for some people.
Recovery to me looks like we know how to appropriately nourish our bodies, and it's different for everybody. My normal eating is different from your normal eating, it's different from Simone's normal eating. Having a healthy relationship with food and our bodies, knowing how to move our bodies in an appropriate manner, behaviors are under control. Of course, we're going to have, thoughts and urges, but they're under control in a healthy manner. That's what recovery looks like to me.
There's no kind of one type of person that has an eating disorder, and so there's no one path for recovery. One of the things that I am constantly telling my clients is that recovery is not a straight shot. There are times where you make strides, whether they're big strides or smaller strides, it all matters. Even the setbacks, there's wisdom to be learned from it, and we also celebrate the positive steps forward too.
About 27 years ago, our daughter, we found had an eating disorder. Before that, I had no idea what an eating disorder was, had not even heard The words eating disorder, we really didn't know where to turn. From that experience, I decided that we needed to have some resources here in the area to help other people.
Carolina Resource Center for Eating Disorders. We are a resource and referral nonprofit in North Carolina, and we provide education, resources, and support for individuals and families struggling with eating disorders. So we provide community outreach and education, professional development. We have our helpline. We're usually the first point of contact for people who are recognizing that there's an issue. We refer to treatment centers, to private practice providers, and we have our support group.
We've been working really hard over the last year or two of putting together presentations for different groups of people in the community. We have presentations specifically for other therapists, educators, medical providers, and athletic trainers.
It's really important for medical providers in the athletic population and sports medicine providers to have an understanding of eating disorders. Athletes are in a unique situation. They have this wonderful opportunity to exercise and be a part of a team, but you can push the limits in the wrong direction. You know, when you look at eating disorders and how prevalent that they are, you start to realize that you know somebody with an eating disorder. And I think we all know somebody.
There was a recent study done, and 28.8 million Americans will struggle with an eating disorder in their lifetime. We lose one person every 52 minutes from an eating disorder. All of us have faced some challenges through 2020, and specifically folks who struggle with eating disorders, it's very, very challenging. It's an isolating illness.
Feelings like fear, anxiety, and isolation. And so COVID has really doubled down on a lot of that. There are just so many aspects of life that have become that much more stressful.
Fear of going to the grocery stores, you know, not making sure the food's not clean enough, who's touched the produce. You know, people who weren't even struggling to begin with are reaching out, you know, with disordered eating patterns.
It's really comforting, at least to me personally and in my role in this organization, to know that people could depend on us. We have our support groups online. We do our education and outreach virtually as well. We just did a virtual ED 101 session, and for that we actually reached across the nation. We had people from all over the country attending that. We have an extremely supportive community. Family members, folks who have recovered, folks who are in recovery, treatment providers. I feel really grateful for our founder, Diana Goodman.
While I'm the founder, there have been so many people who have volunteered, who have given funds, who have helped us in so many ways be what we are today. I think we've provided a community that supports each other, coming together to learn from each other and just to be with each other. That feels really good. To provide that and to be a part of it. Just this summer, someone approached me and this person said, "You saved my life." So that's very humbling, but at the same time, it's so rewarding to know that we are doing a good work.
For the moment, I'm still struggling. But with the support I have been shown for the Carolina Resource Center for Eating Disorders, I have no doubt it can only get better. Thank you.
One of the most inspiring things about when somebody enters the moment of recovery, when they decide to heal, is that moment of commitment to themselves and that moment that they say, "I'm not going to let this rule me anymore." Sorry, did I step in too early? Okay. Okay. Kimberly Pitts inspired me yesterday when she talked about what it took for her to finally reach out and find CRC. Please welcome Kimberly to the stage.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, Christine. Thank you, Simone. I think this is a surreal day for all of us. I know it is for me. Never would have thought 10 plus years ago I would be here. But it's thanks to so many like yourself, so many stepping out in bravery and courage for yourself, as well as those you know and those you don't know. I'm sure you have learned by now that eating disorders thrive in darkness. They thrive in isolation. They thrive in fear. They thrive in secrecy. So today, we're bringing something into the light, something that survives in darkness, we're bringing it into the light together. This past January, my colleagues and I at the Family Guidance Center where I work received the ED 101 training from Simone and Christy Maloney. It was incredibly valuable and necessary, especially considering this past year in terms of the many, many trials and difficulties brought about through COVID. At Family Guidance Center, the main two groups I would say that we serve are those affected by sexual assault and domestic violence. Like so many, through COVID, we've seen our numbers also skyrocket. Our shelter has been at capacity many, many times. The work of my colleagues and I, like that of Simone, has been anything but slow. As she said, that CRC's numbers have greatly increased, and that's good, but it shows that the need is only also obviously increased. So our work, as I said, has not slowed up at all. While it can and should be, must be emphasized every year, in a time, the past couple years and so, whereas everyone has felt so alone, advocacy, awareness, and reminding yourselves and those you interact with that everybody knows somebody has become more critical than ever. My colleagues and I are all very grateful for the training that we received from Simone in January. But as someone who has personally journeyed the very worthy roller coaster ride of eating disorder recovery, I am especially grateful. I was sitting in my office that day, virtually in the training, knowing that it was impacting everyone. But as someone who has journeyed the road of recovery, I was the most grateful because I knew that it was so very needed. Because the people that walk into our office, they go through many things. We might see them call our phones for domestic violence, but we know that's not just one thing they're struggling with, it's many things. And like we've heard tonight, they themselves know someone struggling with an eating disorder, and they may very well be going through that as well. One of my colleagues, all of my colleagues have been impacted by the training, but one of my colleagues is continuing to learn more about eating disorders and desires to become more equipped to better meet the needs of the clients he serves by one day being specialized in providing therapy to those battling eating disorders. Today, as I've said, I graciously get to fill the role of domestic violence court advocate. However, 10 years ago, I was just beginning to step into my recovery. What a long journey it's been, and yeah, 10 years ago, I had a long road ahead. If you asked me then, I simply would not have had the capacity nor the desire at all to be able to perceive the possibility that I could be standing here today at all in front of you as someone who has survived and continues to experience great healing and redemption from an eating disorder. As one who gets to fill the role of advocate, I have the opportunity and great privilege of daily being able to meet people and remind them, or inform them and remind them of their worth and of the fact that they aren't alone in their struggles. Because so often in our struggles, particularly eating disorders, we feel so alone. So I'm thankful that in my role I get to tell people that they aren't. About 2 summers ago, in my own recovery, I needed to be reminded of my worth and that I wasn't alone. Thankfully, that's when I stumbled upon CRC. I was feeling alone one day and I grabbed my laptop, and I guess in a moment of perhaps desperation and seeing my need, I just Googled support groups. I didn't know of any in my area at the time, so I Googled support groups near Hickory, North Carolina, and thankfully CRC is the one I clicked on, and I've been so very encouraged. The work of CRC has greatly encouraged me by reminding me that I'm not alone. And through their advocacy and awareness, such as what they did for my colleagues and I, and what they're doing right now, I've been challenged to seek and build up more resources for those struggling with disordered eating disorders in my own community. Please consider coming alongside CRC and helping them provide vital resources, because everybody knows somebody battling an eating disorder. Thank you.
All right, hold on. So in some ways, our next speaker is the reason we're all here, and is the reason CRC exists at all. She is the daughter of the founder of CRC, and her story in her recovery is why the Carolina Resource Center for Eating Disorders was created at all. And I've been told this is kind of a big day, because it's the first time she's chosen to use her story and come and speak and share publicly with everyone here. So please welcome Vance Goodman.
It's hard to follow that introduction. Oh, and I brought this just as an illustration for those of you who are visual learners about what it means to support someone. Thanks for letting me come. My story is unfortunately not one that is unfamiliar. Over 25 years ago, I was an adolescent with lots of energy, a hilarious laugh, and a deep concern for the world. I can't look at my family members. I was fast and sweet and inquisitive and curious about everything. I was graced with an incredible family and wonderful friends. I was not depressed. I had a good sense of self, and I had a very active mind. I worked hard at everything I put my mind to: my schoolwork, my athletic practices, jigsaw puzzles, and fort building in the backyard. I was not a perfectionist, but I like to know that I did my very best, even if things weren't perfect. And then an eating disorder crept into my life. I had no idea what was happening. My brain was telling me things that were scary and controlling and mean. There was this voice in my head that made up rules and promises to keep me safe. I became a person who was scared and serious and anxious and depressed. The more I followed the rules that were supposed to keep me safe, the louder the voices became. My parents sought support for me, but there were no resources available in Western North Carolina. The general practitioners, psychologists, psychiatrists, and sports medicine folks were ill-equipped to offer assistance. I was hospitalized locally, and I heard through the walls of the room that the nurses were frustrated with me and unable to help me. The assistance I received was counterproductive, putting me on a calorie-counting meal plan that reinforced the rules and the rigidity of the eating disorder. I felt stuck between the voices in my head, the loving care of my family, and the confused medical community who were only doing their best. I stayed alive on a meal plan for years. I went to college on an athletic scholarship. I became an All-American and team national champion in cross country and track and field. But being an elite collegiate athlete and having an eating disorder was not a good combo. It weakened my body. I deferred my scholarship after my freshman year and was admitted to a treatment facility in Arizona, miles from home and my college life. After 90 intense days of treatment, I left the facility and I was told the disorder would be chronic, that I would not get better, and that this would be a lifelong battle. I did battle. I kept myself alive, living with an eating disorder and always on the brink of physical relapse. I wanted to live, but I did not want to live like that. Although I made the decision to not become a victim of suicide, suicidal ideation was a constant companion, so much so that those thoughts no longer scared me when I had them multiple times a day. I live like this, a high-functioning human with a terrible mental illness. I move through life, getting an undergrad degree from UNCA, traveling overseas as a volunteer, getting a master's degree, working in a children's hospital, and then in the nonprofit sector. I always hid my struggle. I did not miss a day of work because of this mental illness. I did not let it hinder me from living the best life that I knew, and that life was a really hard life. Fast forward to years later, when my mother confronted me. She said, "I have worked to help so many people, and I can't not say something to you. I see your eating disorder, and I want to help." It was then that I also saw my eating disorder for what it is: conniving, bullying, a mental illness, and a lie. I decided that the words I heard as a teenager were wrong. I could fully recover. I could rewire my brain and not merely continue to survive this illness. Recovery's been awful at times, so difficult, and it's also been so liberating. I read a quote recently on social media that says, "Recovery doesn't suck. Your eating disorder sucks. Recovery just makes that very obvious." As the eating disorder has been silenced by my recovery, I found myself enthusiastic about life again, laughing hilariously, and caring about the world. I am not depressed, and I do not have suicidal thoughts. It has been tough, but I'm finally able to be gentle with myself. I tell part of my own story to express that eating disorders are brutal, and that everyone needs support. I wish that we had supportive resources when I was 13, but places like the Carolina Resource Center for Eating Disorders did not exist. Thankfully, my mother and a team of passionate advocates in the community did not listen when they were told that a service for eating disorders was not needed here. They pushed to create a nonprofit organization that has the intent to support and educate the community. When I sought help more recently, CRC was there to refer me to an incredible dietitian who has allowed me to cry and get mad and succeed in our appointments. This organization is so important to people who suffer from eating disorders, their supporters, their friends and family, and to the professional community working alongside them in recovery. So then what is recovery? Recovery is reaching out and acknowledging your struggle. Recovery is depending on your people when you need to cry. Recovery is feeling claustrophobic in your own skin. Recovery is hearing the eating disorder and telling it to stop lying to you. Recovery is losing a partner that you trusted and one that betrayed you all along. Recovery is leaving a relationship, albeit an abusive one, and dealing with that grief. Recovery is recognizing your poor, strong, abused, resilient body and allowing it to protect you. Recovery is reaching out and saying, "I cannot do this," only to prove to yourself that you can. Recovery is laughter. Recovery is having a community in your life, one like CRC, that knows how difficult this is, and that helps you find your way back to who you really are. Thank you.
We don't talk enough about dads in the role of eating disorders. And I think a lot of times it is seen as some mysterious female thing, and it is not. It's all our things. And so Bruce Eichelheimer has a beautiful story of how he truly leaned in and became a present parent to his daughter's eating disorder and her recovery. Please welcome Bruce Eichelheimer.
Good morning, everybody. Coming and doing this has been surprisingly difficult for me, but I think it's so important. So about 6 years ago, I still remember the moment. My daughter was 12 years old. I was in the kitchen, I was cleaning up, and like someone hit me on the head with a plank of wood. I see an IP, letters I never knew were so important. And I didn't know what to do to help her and to support her. And so I did something kind of silly. We were heading down to put her in an inpatient facility. It was actually my birthday. And so I shaved my face on that day. And then I took a picture of myself every day, well, almost every day, until she was released. And so I queued up this little video that I then produced from that. And so, yeah, Simone, go ahead. That last bit always chokes me up. So in some respects, I was looking worse as my daughter was looking better. And my daughter was never shy about expressing what was going on. She told everyone she knew and let everyone know that she was suffering from an eating disorder. She eliminated the shame and the shadow that usually goes with that. And when people ask me, like, why are you looking like this? I would tell them exactly why I was doing that. And that was a gift that she gave us. The other thing is that while I was going through this, I looked so ridiculous. We took some extra pictures. See, Simone, get the next one. Yeah. So I got to tell you, like, I have a little beard on my face, but that right there was really uncomfortable. Like, I was sleeping on that. It was so itchy. But by outwardly showing what I could, I was providing my daughter with all the support that I could. And I think the Carolina Resource Center for Eating Disorders it's sort of like a community beard, if that makes any sense, in that it's here to help everybody deal with this incredibly complicated and horrible affliction. So that is my very simple story. Thank you so much.
So it is with great honor that I get to introduce our last speaker this morning, and I want to say thank you to everyone for braving what may be your very first event and coming out and being a part of something. And as Vance said, not isolating anymore and coming out from hiding in this. And I'm gonna say that for everybody, like last time we were here, we all donated. And this is a time right now where CRC is in dire need of volunteers and of donations, given where COVID has been at, and at a time they've also amped up their online presence and their availability to so many people who are needing so much more. So I'm gonna throw in a little thing for everybody, anyone in here who donates $250 or more, I'm gonna
add in $10, and I'm also going to sign a book. If you know someone who's an entrepreneur and could use a book like this, that will be my contribution. But for right now, what I would like to do is bring out the board president of CRC, and that is Joe Eichelheimer. Please welcome Joe to the stage.
Good morning, everybody. I think I'm going to have to adjust this a little bit. I'm a shorty. So nice to see all of you. We have, I think, spent some really good time with each other this morning, and it's been real meaningful time. And as I've just been sitting there and listening to all of the brave speakers, the participants this morning, to be quite honest, have been on a bit of an emotional roller coaster myself. I'm the other half of the Bruce Eichelheimer story. I'm the mom. And a lot of the stories this morning have really hit home. They're very familiar to our experience. And I won't go into any details beyond that at this point, except to thank all of you for your attendance, those of you who are here in person, those of you who are attending online. We're so appreciative of your time this morning, your attention, your compassion, and your care. Specifically, thank you to Christine for guiding us through this experience this morning, for all of the speakers. Your stories are so important. They're so passionate and so impactful, and I can't thank you enough for sharing and for your bravery in standing up before us this morning and telling us where you've been. Thank you to our sponsors. Thank you to our volunteers. Thank you to our board of directors, everyone who has been a part of making this happen. Our hearts really do go out to you. I think that just as the misery surrounding eating disorders precipitates a ripple effect to all of those who are involved, those, of course, who are suffering, their families, their friends, their loved ones, our communities. I think that hope does the same thing. And I think that's what recovery is all about. And so I'd like for us to take that away from us today, take that hope, even if it's just a small nugget at this point in your life, and hang on to it. And when you're able, try to share that hope, share that love, share everything that everyone today has poured into this presentation. And if you feel so moved, we would like to ask for your continued support, monetarily, as a volunteer, helping us spread the word about this very vital, very important organization in our community and the services that they offer and provide to those in need, and really for all of us that are here today. Some of you guys were around to support us during our time of need, and of course for that we are eternally grateful. And and Bruce, coming out of what we went through with our daughter, felt obligated and honored to in turn provide the support that we can to people who are suffering and for families who are living through the hell of an eating disorder. So, thank you again. If you are online or even in person, you can log in, click in to donate that way. Those of you who are here in attendance have a pledge form in your envelopes. You can write a check and include that in your envelope as you're leaving to pick up your breakfast. We've got our volunteers there at the reception table who'll take those. You can fill in your credit card information. And again, we thank you so much for this time. Take good care.